Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 165, and today we are diving into the early data, and I would say early-ish because normally I do this episode 4 days into the format, and this time I waited a whole 6, and there was a reason for that. But still, early data for the through the Omenpaths. This show is brought to you through the Patreon, and I have Robert to report as a new patron, and a bunch of people who I can report as not being patron anymore. So if you think that my content is something that you enjoy, please do join the Patreon. It always helps. And if you can't, you can always subscribe to my YouTube channel or write a comment in the podcast thing that you're using. It always helps. All right. With that, let's move to the preamble. And today is going to be a bit of a soapboxy one. My statement is, Universes Beyond Panic is just another display of Magic the Gathering players' deeply rooted conservatism. And yes, you heard me right. I mean, I know that Magic players, when they vote liberal. And I'm not saying that all of them vote liberal, but if you would make an election and you would have only Magic players voting, there would be a different president in the United States right now. However, this is political spectrum. I think that Magic the Gathering players, at least large group of them, are people that are deeply, deeply conservative. And you can see that in their approach to the game. There are several telltales of that kind of approach to life. Fear of any change, distrust of the authority. These are all things that you would consider with what currently is populist right-wing in most of the countries. However, lots of Magic players, despite being liberal, actually hold that kind of view towards the game that they play. It slightly annoys me. I don't, never will put myself in a position to tell others what they should think. However, it doesn't mean that I have to blindly accept what other people think without having something to say myself, and that's why I'm using my platform for. I think that the Universes Beyond is exactly what I said in the preamble, a panic. And it's a panic that is caused by the fear. And fear is not the best advisor in general. And I think that this fear is linked to the fact that there's something wrong with the game. Don't get me wrong, I do understand it's not in a perfect state. And there are things going on that are not quite comforting for me. I don't think that the Hasbro is a net positive thing for Magic right now. I think maybe, if you go back 15 years, 20 years, when WotC was a small independent company and needed finance to expand, Hasbro had a net benefit impact on Magic. Now, when Magic became actually I saw a post from Saffron Olive that Magic contributes to like 90% of Hasbro's profit. This is disproportional to the size of the company, and because of that, this is their biggest cash cow. They try to fleece it for what it's worth, and I understand that this is a concerning thing. But I also do think that a lot of what people are afraid of is randomly directed. People are afraid that something is wrong with the game. They have this maybe not fully fledged feeling, not fully analyzed feeling that something is wrong. And they are randomly shooting at the walls to find the culprit. And this week, I've read a lot of posts that were complaining about Universes Beyond. And it seems like this is a classic scapegoating situation. People find some kind of rationalization. Why don't they like Universes Beyond? And, you can disagree or agree with them. But I think that if you're playing Magic casual, which hopefully not many of you here do, because it's about the drafting, which is sort of not completely casual format. But if you're playing casual, you can easily not play the Universes Beyond cards, and it should not impact your enjoyment of it, because you should play the decks that you enjoy playing, and you should build a deck to do the thing and try to do the thing. And if you sometimes do the thing, you should be happy. And if your opponent sometimes does the thing, you should be happy for them. I think that, Intangible in the chat says, I don't know if panic is the right word, maybe boiling over of an accumulation of gripes held mostly by non-commander players. I think that, this is a very good way of putting it. Gripes, and you can hit the snail on the head multiple times, and in the end it gets angry. But I do think that Universes Beyond is slightly getting the short end of that stick, or long end of that stick, short end of the stick, the wrong end of that stick it's getting, because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that. I think in the limited environment, I guess immersion is a sort of thing, but it is mainly a mechanistically driven format. I know that you have to play with the cards, and I know that maybe not everyone wants to play with the Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever, but also same people complain that there's too many sets being released, and yet when one of those sets is something that they don't particularly like, all of a sudden this is also a tragedy, because out of 7 sets that are going to be released next year, 4 of them are going to be Universes Beyond. I do, yeah. Smaller sets, different story. This, I'm not touching the size of the set, and I'm not talking specifically about the Spider-Man set, or as we will call it today, through the Omenpaths. I think that this set is deeply flawed for many, many reasons, and this should not enter the discussion of Universes Beyond as itself. I'm very much looking forward to playing Star Trek set, but I also wouldn't mind if Star Trek was Edge of Eternities 2. And I don't see a particularly big difference of me playing Sami, the Navigator, or playing Captain Kirk, the Space Explorer. None of those things will particularly annoy me in draft. I mean, I'm not annoyed by the fact that Sami is in space. I'm not annoyed by the fact that Captain Kirk is in space. The pricing is an issue in Universes Beyond, and this is something that I will never agree. I think that the pricing people out of the game is not a nice thing. I also think that WotC is sort of trying to approach their finances by milking the existing player base for all they are worth, rather than working harder on expanding the player base. And I see that they try to expand by putting those Universes Beyond sets, by appealing to more people. But appeal to more people is not the only thing that they could be doing. They could be more active in drawing new players, or, for example, by making the players that are sort of casual a bit more invested. I don't know that if that would be such a big stretch of them printing like 10,000 copies of a fully fledged Pauper cube, or maybe Artisan cube of some sorts, and sending it to their supported stores, so that every store has a curated, nice version of a cube made by WotC that they can sleeve up and then use it for limited tournaments for their players when they think that they are priced out of actually buying a draft. I think it would bring a lot of joy to people, and maybe convince some Commander players to move on to the drafting. I do think that it would be great to have a special pool of prizes for rookie players in Spotlight and Pro Tour tournaments. Someone who never had Pro Tour points in this year or in the last 5 years or something would be eligible to additional prizes. Because I think one thing is that you start playing, you reach a certain level, and you go to a bigger tournament and you have to win with people who have Hall of Fame in front of their name when they are being listed in the pairings. And it's not a particularly fair competition for people who just started to play the game to play against someone who's been 20 years on the Pro Tour and knows the ins and outs and has a big playtest group that support them. I do believe that a different model of printing cards where it's top heavy, like Sabrina is saying in the chat, and you have those chase cards that are for the collectors and they cost like a fortune, and you have the chaff that you play in the tournaments and it's not particularly expensive. You can buy a deck for 100 quid or something. That would definitely help. And obviously super chase cards are also going to be good for the Commander players, and a lot of things can be done. But I think that those fears, those anxieties, those gripes, and the years of neglecting all the other formats apart from Commander, that is perceived by some. I don't think that is completely true, because we had banger after banger limited sets, so clearly they are putting some thoughts through that. I mean, you can complain that, you know, in 7-8 years ago other formats were cherished, and maybe that's true, but definitely limited formats were not compared to what they are being treated right now. And I think that we should maybe embrace the change a bit more, Because if we start complaining about random things and start sort of like shooting blindly to find the culprit and find the scapegoat, we're never giving like a good feedback to the mothership. And if they don't get good feedback, if they get like random rambling and panicky kind of search for the culprit, they will just ignore what the players are saying, and they will just look at the sales numbers. And the sales numbers, I can only guess, are looking good. And because they are looking good, they're from their perspective, there's nothing to worry about. Now, I do know that this is maybe short-sighted, because it will work until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it's a tragedy for the game. But that's the future WotC problem, and they might take the short-term gains because of stakeholders and shareholders. Yeah, I think that covers my preamble. I could go for hours probably, but you're not here for that, are you? So let's keep it to that. Let's move to the set, and let's first look at the color popularity rankings. And we've had two sets that were unprecedentedly well balanced in terms of color power level. I think that when I showed this graph for Final Fantasy, everything was within 20.1, 20.2%, maybe 18, 19.8 or something. They were basically all the colors were equal win rate, and it's not the case here. White and green have much higher win rate than other colors. Play rate, than other colors. You would expect that in a perfectly balanced set, every color will be played around 20%. White is played at 23.2, green is played at 23.5. So both of them are 3.5 percentage points over that average, which is actually quite a lot. This is a big disbalance in terms of how people are playing the colors, especially in a set that has only 5 color pairs. Black is played at around 19.5, so around where you would expect it to be. Blue 18.6 and red at 15.2. So 15.2 is very little, and it's only 75% of what you would expect in the balance format. And that means that people are actively avoiding red. And they are right. They should be actively avoiding red. If you want to take one home message from this draft, it means that finding a lane in this set is harder, because you have to also, on top of finding a lane, you have to also find a lane that almost actively avoids red. I'm not throwing around the unplayable word to describe colors very often. In fact, I don't think I've ever done that in any of my seminars. And here I'm the closest to say that. I'm not saying that it's completely unplayable, but I'm pretty close to saying that. And if you look at my draft history, I'm living that life. And there are some problems for that, which I will go into in a second. In terms of the win rate, it's perfectly corresponding. White and green are not only the most played colors, but also the most winning colors. And this, for me, is the signal for imbalance. Because if people play that a lot and it still wins a lot, then where is the limit? How many drafters can a pod of 4 support that can draft white? 2, 3? I don't know. But somewhere in that region, that probably 3 or 4 drafters in the pod should be either white or green, and the other one should be the mirror. And that's how the draft should look like in this set, it seems to be. So white wins 56.7%, green 56.1%, average win rate is 55.1%. Then we have blue at 54.7%, black at 53.8%, and red at 52.1%. So the difference between red and white is 4.6 percentage points. And very much like green was the sick man of limited in the last couple of years, slowly but surely red is becoming that problem color. The last several sets have been just bad in terms of red. I think part of it is because in the effort of slowing down the formats, WotC has weakened the aggressive part of red. And since aggressiveness is such a big part of red's identity, losing a big part of their identity is problematic for a color. And WotC still did not find out a way of designing something that would compensate for that loss for the red. So now we end up with mediocre red aggro decks. And at the same time, you don't give the secondary kind of nature to red color. And I think that is good. They're going to sort it out. They know that, but it will take a year or so. While white, actually, how white was made, it was always a bit more resilient to later games. Red was more like, oh, hell breaks loose. I want to win within 7 turns. And they don't want that anymore. They want games to last a bit longer based on the feedback from the players. So if there is someone that we can blame for that, it's us. Yeah, it had this maybe unforeseen consequence that red is not doing particularly well. And I'm not talking only about the through the Omenpaths, I'm talking in general. Right, it is a two-color format. However, due to the quirks of 17 lands, it may look like, oh, a lot of people are splashing. Well, not really. It's a data quirk. I think that most decks are two-color. However, if you put Gallant, Citizen, whatever it's called, into your white-blue deck, and that's a hybrid card with Selesnya, and maybe you have something that can make a treasure or can tap for green, well, all of a sudden you have a deck that looks like splashed in the 17 lands data. And that is a large number of those decks that show two color and splash. These are the decks that are actually two colors but have hybrid cards. And yeah, it will be even more, I think, predominant in blue-black decks that have maybe one knife trick or something, because these cards are splashed all over. Or red-black card decks that have the whatever, the spider manadork thingy hybrid gruel in their deck. So yeah, this will generate a lot of noise in the data. So we can assume that most decks are really two colors. And we can also see that in the win rate data. Both two color and splash decks have around 56% win rate. There's a huge drop to three color decks, which already have like 52% win rate. Thank you, Lane Weaver. That's the one. Yeah. This hybrids make 17 lands think you're splashing, Nate W. That's exactly what's happening, and that's why we see those splash decks in the data. In terms of popularity of the color pairs, well, we have 5 mainly supported color pairs, so I looked mainly at those. And Selesnya is played 34% of the time. 20% is where you would expect it in the perfectly balanced format, and 34.5 is, if I calculated well, a truckload more than 20%. So 17 lands players play green white. That's it. A lot. Because it's given to them a lot. And because it's mighty powerful. Then we have Demir at 23.6. So that's the second most played. And 3.6% over the expected rate. That's fine. That's what you would want. And then 15% at Rakdos, 14% at Azorius, and 12.7% at Gruul. What surprises me here is the predominance of Rakdos. I think Rakdos is not a very good deck, and then people still playing it at 15.2. In terms of the color pair power, and because there are only 5 color pairs, I decided to add also the maybe less common combinations. The only rule was that they had to have at least 1,000 games under their belt. So we have like some free color combinations, some enemy color pairs in this graph. As I said, the only criterion to look at them was above. And Selesnya, despite being the most played, is also the most winning one. 58.8%. That's all the Selesnyas and Selesnyas with Splash. Because I couldn't distinguish between the two-color version and the one that is splashing and the one that has hybrids, I just agglomerated all of those decks into one bar. Second, maybe surprisingly, is Golgari. I mean, the sample size is not huge, but it has a solid 57.2. I think that this is like a neat alternative if either green white and blue black are closed. Maybe Golgari is the sort of like a good escape route, especially if you get the enemy color rare, which seems to be quite good. Then number 3, we have Demir at 56.4 and Azorius at 55.7. So as you can see, there are no particular tiers. It's like going gradually down. And then the same result as Azorius, which is weird, is Abzan with 55.3. And these are the only decks that are above the average win rate of 55.1. Because after that we have Naya, which is 54.9. Gruul does worse than Naya, so adding white makes things better. Gruul at only 53.4. And then we go into the lesser archetypes. Esper and Band at 52.5. Rakdos at 51.5% win rate. Compare that to Selesnya's 58.8. And then Junt and Grixis at 50. Yeah, these are just wishful thinking more than anything. But I think that the most important thing is Rakdos being only 51.5 and Selesnya being as much as 59. This is a big difference, especially in a set with 5 guilds. And I think that this will hugely impact the longevity of the set, because we're talking about Rakdos not being drafted super aggressively already. So it's being open, basically. But despite being open, it still can't win. And Selesnya is super heavily drafted by the 17Lands users, and yet wins 59% of the games. This means that that gap is not going to narrow down significantly as the format progresses. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing to do in this format. I think that this format has plenty of interesting things to figure out, including niche side builds of the popular color pairs that utilize maybe underplayed cards and allow you to find open lane when there are none, and a bunch of those kind of cards. But yeah, it is a problem format with problems that are not only related to the small size, but also to the imbalance of the cards. Yet again, I think that WotC should abandon it altogether. But yet again, we have a situation where there is this A plus B mechanic that promises something amazing and does not deliver, because drawing A plus B is just not very easy. I think that we were talking already in the Skeleton Crew, or in this particular case, Carapace Crew episode, our worries about Mayhem not being supported sufficiently, not being powerful enough, and those fears have unfortunately came to full fruition. Okay, this is all that I can talk about in terms of those general format statistics, but we have plenty to talk about individual cards. And we're going to start by looking at best bombs, top commons, and top uncommons for each color. Not color pair, but each color. And then we're going to go into the 5 archetypes. And then we're going to close it and move on with our lives. White. Like, white has more bombs than there are listed on this slide. I just put 3 because I selected 3 as the maximum. But I think that according to my criteria, which was over 61% game and hand win rate, there were a couple of more cards that would fit this criteria. But number 1 most winning card in white is Remarkable Readings. 4 mana enchantment. It's an aura. You enchant a land, and when it enters, you create 3 1/1 green and white human citizen creature tokens. And the land has 1 mana and tap it. Target creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. You can activate only a sorcery. Now, this is ridiculous of a card. It's basically hop to it that also can pump pump one creature by like +3/+3/+4/+4 just for tapping in 1 mana. Super ridiculous card. Also tutorable by the one of the hybrid signposts. Just a great card, and I would love to open it in my first pack and just force white through that. Number 2, a most helpful Weaver. That's a saga. It costs 2 mana, and first chapter is just make a 2/2 with reach. That's already 2 mana 2/2 with reach. The second chapter is just put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it becomes a spider hero in addition to its other types, which can be a benefit but can be a drawback. I mean, the +1/+1 counter is not a drawback, but the being a spider can be a drawback in some corner cases. And the third chapter is target creature you control gains double strike until end of turn. So lots of aggressive value, well distributed. You're moderately happy to play it on turn 2. You are also moderately happy to draw it late in the game, because it can help break the board stalls through the careful application of that double strike. So yeah, card that is good early and late. Why not? I'm quite happy about it. And the third one, Ademi of the Silk Shoots. That's a 2 mana 3/2 flash. 1 mana. It can gain flying until end of turn, and you can pay 1 and sacrifice it. And creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. I have to say, I had my opponent concede in response to me playing Ademi of the Silk Shoots. Oh yeah, it has flash. So I played it at instant speed and blew up their allegedly key removal spell because opponent just conceded on the spot when they saw that I cast Ademi in response to their removal. Fun times. Then we have top commons, and there is a reason why I put the graphics, the art from Spectacular Tactics in my title slide for today's episode. It's by far the best common in the set so far. 2 mana, you can choose 1, put a counter on target creature you control, it gains hexproof until end of turn, or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Instant speed. Now, I think that this card could have been a sorcery and would have still been playable. Well, oh no, it wouldn't work with sorcery for the bloody hexproof. But it had to be weakened by somehow, because 2 mana to kill something or 2 mana Snakeskin Veil as a modal spell is just too much. It's so good. Yeah, I guess 3 mana is the only thing that you can do about it. The +1/+1 counter can trigger some synergies. The +1/+1 counter helps winning combat. At the same time, the hexproof helps dealing with removal. And the payout of killing the most impactful creature that opponent has on board is not something you can complain about either. It's just very good card. You should start picking it. It's basically first pickable. It's like better than most uncommons. There are 6 uncommons, I think, in the set that are better than this. Maybe if it was not so frustrating if it was an uncommon, but it is a common, so you will see a lot of it. And that sort of is probably part of the reasons why Gruul is not doing that well, because you will spend so much time stabilizing the board, putting big stuff on board, and then just seeing the Spectacular Tactics just making a mockery out of all your work. Number 2 common is Mothwing Shroud. Still great. It's just worse than Spectacular Tactics. 3 mana, that's basically Banishing Light. Exiles a permanent until it leaves the play. It doesn't leave the play very often, so that's one thing that this has going for it. And number 3, white common, City Pigeon, white for a 1/1 flyer, and when it leaves the battlefield, create a food token. This is the enabler for all the web slinging and webbing mechanic from the set. You can just play it early, attack with it, and then bounce it to your hand, make a food, get a discount on mana for something big, and replay it, and maybe do it again. Some decks don't deal with City Pigeon very well. Some decks don't see it as a problem, and I think it's going to have a very modal kind of win rate. You know, if you're playing blue black and they have like a couple of the 1/3s with vigilance and flying that mill its owner when on attack, when they have a couple of those, the City Pigeon looks laughable. But if they don't, it can generate so much value. So can be super strong or can be absolutely useless. Sabrina in the chat says Alex from Limited Level Ups mentioned diminishing returns for pigeons 2/3. Yeah, I do agree with him on that one. Putting more copies is just making your deck not having impact. I think that one way that white decks lose in this format is when you overload them with cheap drops and they don't have any top end. And I think that you should make active care of having enough top end in your deck, because otherwise you don't have ways of pushing damage. Or, as I played and trophied earlier, you can just put all the cheap drops and then supplement them with tons of tempo removal, and that may be also working. I had a deck with like 4 counter spells, the 3 mana ones, 2 of the bounce spells that bounce something into hand, and a couple of creatures that can return something to their hand. And I was just dropping 2 drops and 3 drops, and then bounce counter, bounce, and they're dead all of a sudden. So that can also work. Top white uncommons. Number 1 is the Sarn of the Silken Throne. Spider-Man UK in the paper version, representing my adopted country. Sarn of the Silken Throne, 4 mana for a 3/4, but it has Enweb for 3 mana. And at the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more creatures enter the battlefield under your control this turn, you draw a card and gain 2 life. Now, of course, you have to play this card in such a way that you trigger it at least once. If you don't trigger it, it's not particularly good as a 3/4 vanilla. But trigger it once, and it's a 3/4, draw a card, gain 2 life, which is a great rate for it. So yeah. Yeah, it can be easily done when you have the mana dork and bounce it, return, play Sarn and play the mana dork again. Our good friend City Pigeon, attack with the pigeon, web sling it back to your hand, put Sarn into the battlefield, recast the pigeon, and then draw a card, gain 2 life. Sweet deals. Once you can do all kinds of things like that, Sarn of the Silken Throne becomes premium. Second best uncommon, Sudden Strike. And by the way, we see that in top 3 commons and top 3 uncommons, we have Spectacular Tactics, Mothwing Stride, and Sudden Strike. All of those being removal spells. Sudden Strike, destroy target attacking or blocking creature. Instant speed, of course. And yeah, the card is better than I gave it credit to. I was a bit skeptical, but I think that good removal is pretty valuable in those formats. So Sudden Strike has very, very good win rate numbers. Probably it does have lower win rate than Spectacular Tactics, though. And then we have Generous Betty Ray. 3 mana. 3 mana for a 2/3 when Generous Betty Ray enters. You put a counter on something. Notice on another something, so it can't put a counter on itself, which means that... and it doesn't say you control, so be careful when you play it. If the opponent doesn't have anything, you will have to put a counter on their creature. Whenever Generous Betty Ray attacks, target modified creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. Yeah, it's a very good card, especially when you can modify it and it becomes like a solid lifelinking threat. Yeah, Sabrina, I know that Alex made an entire video on the templation, on the templates of this deck. I can tell you the story from my early access when opponent played the Trail of Teacups, is it? The saga in green. The first chapter there says mill 5 cards and then you deal damage to a creature equal to the mana value or toughness or power of a creature, of the highest power or mana value or toughness of a creature in your graveyard. And this one also doesn't say to a creature opponent controls. And my opponent went like turn 2 nothing, turn 3 creature, turn 4 this saga, and I didn't do anything till then. And they realized after they cast that now they have to pick a target, and the only target is their creature. And they're tanking and tanking and tanking and watching the clock move on. But in the end, they just had to take it. They killed their creature. Then they didn't have an effect for the second chapter, so they wasted 2/3 of the saga. And I managed to stabilize and win that game, actually, thanks to them killing their own creature. Yeah. Generous Betty Ray, though, pretty good card, especially when it can when you modify it itself. Okay, blue bombs. Only one card that met my criteria: Goban Gene Splicer Savant. 2 mana 1/1 can't be blocked. When it deals damage to a player, connives, and you can flip it for 1 and a Grixis. This reminds me of this creature from Bloomborough, the Shore Looter, I think it was called. It was a rat for 2 mana. It couldn't be blocked, and it looted every turn it attacked. And obviously, Goban flips into Fleam. Yes, I'm sorry that I didn't name the thing it flips into, but it was indeed the all-star celebrity of non-universes beyond Magic, Fleam. The I look like loot, but I'm likable. Which is also a powerful card. I mean, it's a flyer that allows you to cast cards that were discard it into your graveyard for their cost -2 mana as a sort of mayhem. Goban, very solid. It can't be blocked and it connives every turn, so it will grow very quickly to a large creature that can't be blocked. It would be perfect, again, in this kind of like a tempo deck where you cast a 2-drop, the 2-drop that is a formidable clock, and then you just hide behind counter spells and bounce and removal and hope to win a game like that. But no other blue card crosses my 61% game and hand win rate bar for being called upon. Top commons, number 1 is Phantasmal Vision, 2 mana, 1/3 flying vigilance. Whenever this creature attacks, mill a card. It helps with some synergies, fueling the graveyard. 1/3 vigilant flying body is good for pinging the opponent. It actually does surprisingly well in blue-white decks because putting a counter or 2 on this makes it a super annoying card to deal with. Black has some graveyard synergies. Solid card. And also it stops pigeons, so it also makes it much tougher for a pigeon-oriented web-slinging deck to actually web-sling, which is great because that's probably the strongest version of the deck. Number 2, blue common, Drix Interception. 1 blue. Choose one or both, counter target spell, or tap 1 or 2 target creatures. I played a deck with 4 of them and trophied with it, and I had another additional counter spell in that deck. It worked fine. And, because it was a tempo deck, I actually won a game just by tapping 2 creatures of an opponent and attacking with flyers. And that was it. I didn't counter anything. I just used it at 3 mana, tap 2 things. It has it in its range. Don't forget about it. And the third best common in blue is Unstable Experiment. 1 in the blue, instant. Target player draws a card, then up to 1 target creature you control connives. Now, remember, when you're casting it, you need to have a creature target, otherwise you won't be able to connive, and it's just 2 mana, draw a card. And when you are attacking into something, take into consideration that blue can have this as a combat trick, and don't run into it, as I may or may not have done in the first day of the format when I said, what can go wrong if I block this 1/3 with my 2/2? I learned very quickly what could go wrong, and that is this 1/3 turning into a 2/4. Well, early days are gone. Now I'm much more shrewd in blocking things that whenever an opponent has 1 and a blue open. In terms of uncommons, top uncommon for blue is actually Vexed Bots. 2 mana, 1/1 artifact creature, robot villain. Whenever another villain you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This ability triggers only once each turn. Super good, grows very quickly. Predominantly, it's a blue-black card. 75% of blue-black creatures in the set are villains, so it will trigger quite a lot. And this is another thing that is like this weird, small, cheap threat that can scale up with the game. And you played Vex Bots on turn 2, you leave the mana open on turn 3. If they play something that is annoying, you can counter it. If they don't, you can maybe flash in one of the multiple flash villains in this set, either the 2/2 flyer or the 2/1 that connives every time you attack. And Vexed Bots also grow, and you start pushing damage after damage, and you can control the game very well because you had an early drop, and early drop that scales well into the late game. And then second best uncommon is Robotics Mastery, 5 mana for an aura. Again, as with the previous aura that was the best white card, I think part of the range of the card is this Signpost blue-white uncommon that lets you fetch for a saga. It gives the creature +2/+2, and you also make 2 1/1 robot artifact creature tokens with flying. So 4/4 of stats across 2 bodies, instant speed for 5 mana. This is a very good deal. You do have to make sure that you don't get blown out. Play it on your ward creature. Don't play it when opponent has open mana. The basic tenets still apply. But once you can clear this low bar of planning ahead, you are in for a treat, because that card does a lot of good things for your deck. Especially when you play with things like Phantasmal Vision, which you can turn into a 3/5 Vigilance. Good luck killing that in this format. And number 3, blue and common, Arger, Tidal Spinner, 3 mana 2/2. When it enters, return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner hand. So Mana War, still good, still game. Black Bombs, well, we have plenty of them. There's 3 at least. So black at least has really strong rares to look forward to. And the top rare, and I think the top win rate card in the whole set, is Luis Pompous Pillager. I know that lots of people speculate that this is Luis Scott Vargas, but actually, when you look at the art, that's clearly Luis Salvato, isn't it? Anyway, Black X for a legendary creature vampire villain. It's a 2/1 with lifelink that enters with X +1/+1 counters on him. But wait, there is more. When it enters, he deals X damage to target opponent. And of course, that's the lifelink damage because it has lifelink, so you drain opponents for X. And, I've been on the receiving end of it. Like someone casts it for 5, and they end up with a 7/6 lifelinker that's already drained for 5. Not a good situation, especially if you don't have a removal on it on the spot. My opponent cast it for 10 today, but I had a counter spell, so it doesn't count really, does it? Does it? Counter spell good. Number 2, Black Bomb, is Range Speedway Saboteur. 5 mana for 2/3, villain of some sorts. And when it enters, you look at top 9 cards of target opponent's library. And then put the rest, exile 2 of them face down. And then you put the rest of them on the bottom of their owner's library in random order. And the 2 cards that you set aside, you may play them for as long as they remain exiled. And you can spend mana of any color to cast those spells. So, hey, they have a white creature. No problem. Just cast it for colorless. A very strong card. 9 card selection is huge. There are only 4, arguably, if not 3, color pairs in this format. So it's quite likely that you're going to get cards that fit your deck because you are likely to play a mirror matchup. And that's why Range get this extra bonus in this set. But even without it, digging 9 cards deep in opponent's deck to find that removal, and you can cast it wherever, great. And number 3, on the rare front, Villainous Wrath. I almost said Villainous Wealth out of habit, but it's Villainous Wrath, clearly a play on the Villainous Wealth. 5 mana for target opponent loses life equal to the number of creatures they control, and then you destroy all creatures. Easy, pink for 5, move on with your life. In terms of commons, Damning Caress comes up on top. I'm super happy I changed it to my black common and last second in the pack 0, pick 0 magic data science kind of traditional pre-format game. Damning Caress, 5 mana for a sorcery, destroy target creature, you gain 2 life. But if you have a villain, costs 2 less. And I think that tells us that 3 mana for the kind of unconditional removal with upside is much. Because we had a bunch of examples of cards like that overperform, even at the sorcery speed. There was the one from Lord of the Rings that was really good, Claim the Precious. Now this one is doing a similar thing, even it costs 5, but in blue-black deck, well, 95% of the time, if you have a creature on board, it's going to be some sort of a villain. Then number 2, we have Scorpion Sting. This is marginally lower than Damning Caress, but still very good. 2 mana instant, target creature gets -3/-3. And then the third card, and they are all in the sort of like tier 1 of black cards, these 3 and nothing else, with the highest win rate. Number 3 is Merciless Enforcer. 2 mana, 2/1 lifelinker, and for 4 mana, it can ping opponent for 1, which means it drains, which means you gain a life. Pretty strong common, actually, and still undervalued. Top uncommons, well, the best win rate uncommon is Remorseless Coup. 2 and a black instant, put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library. You lose 2 life unless you control a villain. And, yeah, turned out that most of the time you don't lose life, and you definitely get rid of the creature on opposing side. So yeah, card is pretty solid. Second best, oh yeah, and it's instant speed, of course. Second best black uncommon is Preamble, Envoy of the Bog. 4/4 with menace for 5 mana. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then surveil X, where X is the number of counters on it. And, eventually people will have to block it. They would just have to. And it has menace. And who knows what kind of tricks you have. And you generate card advantage by conniving, by surveilling. You got really a huge power of shaping the top of your library to get the most optimal answers to whatever you see on the opposing side. So yeah, really strong numbers for Preamble and Envoy of the Bog. And then third card that I wanted to highlight is Neil, Vessel of Valgavoth. 3 mana 2/2. When it enters, return target villain card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can rebuy any of those cards that you connived away, and it gives you bonus. Villains you cast cost 1 less to cast. Really solid all-rounder card. It does similar to Archetype Spinner. It's one of those classic designs of the ETB creatures, Manowar and Gravedigger, with a modern twist on those. Red bombs. This is the slide. There's not even a card that is close to being a bomb. Normally you see something like hovering around 60% and you think, this stretch I might say that it's a bomb. I think that the highest win rate card in red was like maybe 58%. That's in the rares and mythic bracket. That's not good at all. In terms of commons, here also, I'm going to tell you, these are the 3 best commons. It doesn't tell you much about how good those commons are. And I can give you the answer, not very good. I think highest win rate of those cards is 53, which is below the average win rate for 17Lands users. And we have Deathlane Burst, Sadistic String Puller, and Shock. 2 Mayhem cards and a very, very cheap and efficient removal that helps you pushing tons of damage when you have your explosive starts, for example. Top rated commons, and 1 card here is above the others. Lavaborn Goblins. This is actively a good card. 5 mana for a 5/4 haste, but it has Mayhem for 3. So if you can discard a card on your turn 3 somehow and cast Lavaborn Goblins as a 5/4 haster on turn 3, well, that's great. And I think that you should be aiming at least partially at that. But I think that just generally 5/4 haste is solid, and it can open up attacks that you wouldn't have possible ever. Wisecrack then. 2 in the red, and this one is much worse in terms of the win rate from Lavaborn Goblins. 2 in the red for an instant. Target creature deals damage equals to its power to itself. If that creature is attacking, Wisecrack deals 2 damage to that creature's controller. Solid removal spell, but already lower win rate than Lavaborn Goblins, which were not amazing themselves. So yeah, I guess if you're being pushed into red and that's your only lane, I guess that's where you end up. Mind you, the problem with the getting rewarded by being red is that normally there will be a couple of bombs in a particularly weak color, and if you can pluck those and get some fixing, boy, you're in for a treat. However, here we don't have that, and the win rate of red and red decks in general is quite low in this particular set. Oh, and we have the Infernus, the sort of mono red build around, where for 2 in a red, you get a 0/0, but it gets +1/+1 for each mountain you control. And when it enters, you can search your library for a basic mountain. And when this dies, you can sacrifice a land, but not necessarily if you don't want to, you can sacrifice anything. Green bombs. Well, first one is King of the Cold Blood Curse. 2 green for a lizard villain, legendary, 5/5. It has trample, and when the curse enters, up to one target creature loses all abilities and becomes a green lizard that has base power and toughness of 4/4. And this is amazing. Like sometimes you have this like throwaway creature lying around that doesn't do anything. Slam that King of the Cold Blood Curse, turn the other things into a 4/4, and you can straight away attack with the thing that you made into a 4/4. So it's like a 9/9 for 4 mana that has partial haste. And as you can imagine, this brings good win rate numbers. Then number 2 is the Scouring Stormstone. 1 black for a legendary creature villain. The Scouring Stormsoul's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. So if you have 12 lands on board, it's going to be 12/12, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. So all the champ blocks are off. You need to block it with the real thing. Also, for 5 mana, you can return this card and a land from your... 1 GG and not BB. For 3 green, you can return this card and target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Now, keep in mind, you have to be able to put a land into the graveyard somehow. This is why when I'm playing Scouring Stormsoul, I will prioritize maybe Connive, conniving lands to the graveyard, maybe milling a bit. I like to play Scour the City if I play the Scouring Stormstorm. Maybe Evolving Wilds. If there are ways that make it easy to put a land into the graveyard, make sure to put them into your deck, because being able to recur the Scouring Stormsoul is a very powerful ability. And then the last one we have that is in the bomb category, Kren Undercity Dreamer. 1 in a green for a 1/2 legendary human citizen hero. When it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So it's like the 2/3 common, but instead of that, it costs 2 mana and has 1 point of power toughness less. Just to give you the impression, you're getting for 2 mana a creature that is very similar to a 4 mana common, apart from +1/+1. And that one has second mode, but this one also has second mode, and that is flipping it into a different creature, and that's a massive double striker that can basically give itself indestructibility, which I think is a big part of the power of that card. Top green commons, favorite fighter, 4 mana for a 4/4. When it enters, make a treasure, can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. If you give it menace, it's unblockable. Sweet combo, and someone did it against me. Then we have Zan Tunnelweb Explorer as number 2. This is a 5 mana 4/3. When it enters, you can search your library for a basic, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. And it has Unweb for 3, so you can technically cast it for 3 mana, ramp yourself, then you have like tons of things to do on turn 4. Because problem with that strategy is that when you run out of steam, it's painful to watch you play. And surprisingly, at number 4, Grow Extra Arms. 1 in a green for a combat trick. It costs 1 less to cast if it targets a spider, and target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So it can be a super efficient combat trick. Your opponent is at 4, and you just make a silly attack. So maybe one thing passes the defensive outline of the other team, and then bam, you just put a +4/+4, and they are dead. It must be a great feeling, but I think that this is mainly how this card is being used. And it's doing well for itself because it's in top 3 green commons. Green top uncommons, you have Terrific Team Up, 4 mana, but costs 2 less if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater. 1 or 2 target creatures you control each get a +1/+0 bonus to attack. They deal damage equal to their power to any target creature that an opponent controls. So basically, it's like double bite. And it works well with the second best green uncommon, Selesnya Archivist, 4 mana, also for 3/3 human citizens. And when this creature enters, you can choose 1. you either return a card with mana value 4 or greater from your graveyard to your hand. So you can return a creature, but you can also return terrific team up and cards like that from the graveyard straight into your hand. Or if it is really worth it, you can exile target artifact or enchantment. And sometimes you will have to be doing that, and you're going to be fine with it because that game was quasi lost, and the archivist saved your bacon then. And lastly, from green, we have Rouse the Swarm. 4 mana. When it enters, you make a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach. And then you gain 1 life for each creature, for each spider you control. And also, spiders that you control have bonuses, +1/+1, and can't be blocked by creatures with Defender. Lastly, we have some multicolors. Here are the bombs. Aleni, the 3/5 that can pump the team and also can make the team, because whenever you cast a creature spell, you create a 1/1 green and white human citizen. That card is so clearly busted, and it wins games on its own. And it's a kill on sight. Just a wonderful card. Then we have Quarenus, Horizon Splicer. 3 white-black for a legendary creature, human scientist villain. It's a 4/4. And when it enters, you exile up to 1 target permanent and up to 1 card in any of the graveyards. And when Kunerus gets killed in some way, you get back your card, but unfortunately the opponent also gets it. So your job is to limit their hand in such a way that you don't give them much choice, and you have plethora of choice. And I think I was talking about similar scenarios with someone, and then I played that card in a deck today. I was playing a green-white deck that was splashing red for... There is the modified creature that exiles cards from the top of your library, the white-red, and I had this in Kunerus. And I could splash quite easily because I had couple of the 4/3s that fetch a land, and I had the little dude that puts a land on top of the library, and it all worked. I never had a problem with casting it, but when I cast this thing, it was backbreaking for the opponent because their big thing was bounced. If there was any counters, then they're gone. And most of the time, I was choosing very good targets with ATBs to exile with Kuneus. So yeah, it ended up pretty well for me to play that card. And the third multicolor bomb, MacD and Itla Sky Snarers, 1 and hybrid Azorius for a flyer, a 2/2. Artifact and creatures your opponents control enter tapped. And this probably is a bit of a pain for most of the decks when all their things come into play tapped. There is not much blocking interaction. You need to start racing, but you're falling behind. It hoses all the haste creatures. And it's a 2/2 flyer for 2 mana, which is, you can't ask much more from those kind of cards. Some other multicolor bombs. Here I have a bunch of 7 drops in Niche and Wither. Niche is giving all the villains +2/+2, drawing you a ton of cards every turn, and increasing your maximum hand size to 8. Wither, Cocoon Keeper, that's a 7 mana 5/5 Vigilance lifelink in Azorius. And it has Vigilance, lifelink, and when it enters, you may exchange life totals with that player. If you lost life this way, you will draw that many cards. So for example, you have it in your country for 2 years, then there is a nuclear catastrophe the size of Chernobyl. These kind of devices will be the first ones to know that there was a significant radiation leak, and they will tell you to go to the shelters and whatnot. And here we have also a card that super surprised me how good the numbers on it is. Cheering Crowd. I honestly thought that this card is almost unplayable. My opponent cast it against me once, and I made a mockery out of it. So I used the extra mana to cast the creature ahead of curve. They put a counter on it and got some mana and cast a creature ahead of curve. Then I put a third counter on it, got a ton of mana, and I killed it, and I killed the other creature, and just like all their advantage was lost, and I had so much mana advantage and board presence, and I won that game without any kind of issues. But I see that the win rate on that card is super high, which means that if you don't have removal, all of a sudden that card becomes quite solid. And it's a weird card to play. Maybe there's misplaying against it, and that's why it wins so much. But 62% or 63% on that card is actually quite a high win rate. Okay, there are other multicolor rares, but they have lower win rate than fitting to my bomb tier. In terms of commons, the order is Leyline Weaver, 59% win rate. Then you have Gallant Citizen, 58.4% win rate. Then you have the Wonderweave Aerialist, the Azorius one at 57.4. Then you have Mob Lookout at 55.7. And then you have Knife Trick at 54. And by the way, 54 is a pretty decent win rate for Rakdos cards. It means that Knife Trick is actually a good card. It's just the archetype is atrocious. But it's definitely the card that pulls it up rather than pushes it down, unlike the actual Rakdos Signpost and Commons. But I think it makes sense that Leyline Weaver is a very powerful one because it can go to many decks and ramp and is just fabulous in what it's doing. Plus, like the casting of the 4-drop and still being able to attack with the Leyline Weaver or still keeping up some kind of a combat trick. That's a sweet utility for that card. Gallant Citizen draws you a card, which never can be wrong. And I think in this set is particularly good. So that's why. And it's also in the top archetype, which means that best cards in the set will pull its performance up. And the Wonderweave Aerialist is just solid. It's solid plus maybe even in Azorius deck at 57.4. Nothing to write particularly home about. But these three are the classically playable ones, and then Mob Lookout is probably more situational than anything, and Knife Trick is the victim of Rakdos being just bad. In terms of top uncommons, we have several tiers, and I would say tier 1 is at around 60% is this Janai and Hoppy, Terrell, Alessos, and Pras. Don't worry, we're going to see them in a second. Then there's the sort of tier 2 with Serena Bargain Spinner. That's the 3/2 flyer on your turn that can find an aura. And I'm pretty sure that a bunch of its win rate is that when it finds a good aura, it's really, really strong. And then fully tier 2 is Kumonosu, the Watchful. That's the Azorius 4/4 that puts a counter on something. And when something with the counter deals damage, you exile the card of your library and you search. And you can cast it until the end of your next turn. Carlos Wave Schemer, that's the Demir Signpost, and Diligent Webkeepers, the Selesnya. These are sort of tier 2 cards. And then the rest is just tier 3 and 4. Starting with Rhinos Rampage at 54.9, going down to Nu and Sumi Career Criminals, the Rakdos Signpost 5-drop at 51%, which is horrendous. So here we have your top uncommons, Jinai and Hoppy, Terrell, and Alessos. 2 Selesnya ones, and 1 Demir one. And Spider-Man said this one is called Morbius, and Morbius, great, confirmed. 3/1 flying vigilance lifelink is a hell of a combination of a card, and when it dies, drawing your card with selection, that's a cherry on top. The second tier, we have the Aura Bird, we have the Kumonosu, which often will be a 5/5 vigilance, and we have Carlo the Wave Schemer, the menace thing that whenever a villain you control enters, it connives. Oh yeah, and Diligent Webkeepers, that's the fourth second tier multicolor uncommon. Diligent Webkeepers being 4 and Selesnya Hybrid for a 4/3. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, which is great. All right, that covers the individual cards and colors. Okay, so this is just a reminder of the power level, and I'm going to go from the most powerful color to the least powerful color combination. Starting with Selesnya, 58.8, Dimir, 56.4, Azorius, 55.7, and then the red color pairs, 53.4 and 51.5 for Ragnos. And for every color, I'm going to do the same for commons and uncommons. I'm going to pick the best common, hidden gem, a card that I selected for some reason to be a hidden gem, and a trap, again, a card that maybe is played a lot despite not having good numbers, or looks like it's something that will be good in this archetype, but it's not. And through that, we can sort of get the nice feel about what the color pairs are about. In Selesnya, quite unsurprisingly, best common is Spectacular Tactics, 62.9% game and hand win rate, which is, bomb level, basically. You can load probably as many of those as you physically can. It deals with a lot of problems. It protects your creatures from removal. It's just a very good card. It's the hidden gem that I selected that is maybe a bit surprising. Scout the City, 2 mana. You can choose one, either mill 3 cards and you may put a permanent from among those into your hand and gain 3 life, or destroy target creature with flying. And I think that works very well as a sort of spell that can kill a flyer, because flyers can be quite annoying. But the payout clause of, you know what, I'm going to sort of look at top 3 cards of my library and hopefully pick something useful for myself. You will rarely miss. Sometimes you will have to take a land, whatever. But if you mill 3 lands of top, that's not a terrible thing to have. And it has like some niche uses. I know that some white-green decks have an issue of putting land into the graveyard, and maybe you have this rare that you can reanimate from the graveyard, but you have to return a land from the graveyard to the play together with it. And it's a good way of adding a card into your deck that enables you that kind of synergy. So I think that you should start playing it more often. I think that one copy is perfectly serviceable in most green decks. And I think that especially if you play like green black, it's actively good in those, because you want to fuel your graveyard. I think that there is a reanimator deck. I played one, unfortunately didn't trophy with it, but I had blue black, and I was splashing for the white card, the 5/5 that whenever it's dealt damage, it gets counters instead of damage. And obviously, I didn't plan to cast it ever, but I just had so much connive that I could just dump it from my hand. And I had a couple of those reanimation spell, and I had 2 copies of the 7 mana return 6 creatures, up to 6 creatures from the graveyard to play. It was a fun deck. It had its issues, and I lost one game to a very powerful tempo deck against someone from my Discord, by the way. They were kind enough to say GGs after that and rub it in. I liked it. Their deck was so sweet, by the way, and that was the trophy game that I lost to them. And then one game I lost to just being slowish on mana. But it was fun to play, and it was a different way of playing Dimir, which was more focused on graveyard synergies rather than playing villains. The trap I selected is the Eccentric Arachnologist. 3 mana, 2/3, taps for any mana, and then for 3 mana in a tap, you can put a counter on target spider. Just doesn't work. You get so much better mana dork in the 2/2 for 2 mana that if you need to put Eccentric Arachnologist, you probably were not in the right lane for drafting the deck that ramps. And that's, I think, the problem with it. It's not even the card itself. It's just like you have a much better alternative for it. So if you play it, you probably did not have an open lane. Then when it comes to uncommons, the best uncommon, and one of the best uncommons in the set, Terrific Team Up. 4 mana for an instant. It costs 2 less to cast if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater. And then 1 or 2 target creatures you control get +1/+0, first of all, which is already super strong. Well, not in itself, but then they deal the damage equal to the power to target creature and opponent controls. It is a bite spell also. And green removal a bit struggles in this set because there's just so many creatures with death touch. I played one game where I had like a bunch of those fight spells, and my opponent just played 5 death touchers, and I'm just sitting with those fight spells in my hand and looking like a complete buffoon. Because what do I do? Do I cast by removal to kill something and lose a creature? Doesn't sound like a great deal. This one goes over that kind of issue, and win rate of 64.8 is just amazing. So yeah, terrific team up. Also, like 4 mana spell, you can return it with Selesnya Archivist, the card that we mentioned before, that can return a 4 mana value spell from your graveyard to your hand. Hidden Gem I selected. Now I see that this one has a significantly lower win rate than Terrific Team Up, but 59.3 is good. And I was very skeptical of that card before the set was released. And in fact, it turns out that it's perfectly playable. Ancestral Carvings. I think that the decks, most of the decks that I play will have like in the range of 15 to 17 creatures. And I think that makes Ancestral Carvings really good. This is when it enters, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order, and you can tap and pay 1 and sack it to create a treasure token. I think that you will hit 2 creatures more frequently than I would have expected beforehand, based on how many creatures are there in the deck. And that makes it good. And also I noticed that sometimes it's just the selection that is good, because maybe you don't even need to draw the 2 creatures, but you want some top end to draw later, because those Selesnya decks will have like those explosive starts, and then they peter out quite quickly, and they don't have good ways of outcarding the opponents. And like the mirror decks at this stage will have a bunch of card draw, potentially open, and they will start doing disgusting things. And that's where Ancestral Carvings can generate this kind of card advantage. Slack360 asks, is there a way to see the win rate percentage depending on the number of creatures in the deck? Not yet. It will be possible later, I would say, like in a week and a half or so, when 17Lands release their data for the deck composition. And then I can start looking at those kind of questions. Always welcome those kind of questions from listeners and from viewers. But most of the time I will be able to say, yeah, it will be possible in a week or 2. Trap I selected. And again, not the super trap. I think all the Selesnya uncommons have pretty good win rate. And if they don't, they are just not played at all. But one card that is played quite a lot and has only 57.2 win rate is Costume Closet. That's a 2 mana artifact, enters with 2 counters, +1/+1 counters. And you can tap it to move a +1/+1 counter from it to any creature you control. And then at sorcery speed. And then whenever a modified creature you control leaves the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on this artifact. Remember, when you play in paper, it's not when a creature with a counter dies, it's when a modified creature dies. So when you have a creature with an aura and it dies, you will put a +1/+1 counter on this artifact. Don't forget that, because it's easy to forget in paper. Arena will do it for you. And the card is, by the way, pretty good in white-blue. It's just not particularly good in Selesnya. Oh yeah, it just leaves and not dies. That's correct. It's when it leaves the battlefield. Yeah, and equipment, it works also with equipment. Dimir, top common is Damning Caress. 5 mana sorcery, destroy target creature, gain 2 life, and it costs 2 less to cast if you control a villain, which in Dimir is basically always. So 3 mana, kill something, gain 2 life. 60.8% win rate. As I said, I'm super thrilled I picked it in the Pick Zero competition from Magic Data Science. Because, I think that my first instinct was to pick Scorpion Sting, which is not far behind, but it's always nicer that I picked the more powerful black card that maybe was less intuitive. Hidden Gem I selected is Merciless Enforcers. 2 mana for a 2/1 with lifelink, and it has 4 mana ability. It pings opponent for 1, which means that you gain 1 life. So it basically drains for 1 for 4 mana. And it has a win rate of 60.4, which is just below the Damning Caress. And this card goes super late still. It's played, people play it. It's just that this is something you can count on wheeling in a draft, even with the pack 2, despite being quite good. A trap I selected is Clandestine Work. 3 mana, surveil 2, then draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life. Versions of this card have been good to solid in the recent sets. Here it has a 54% win rate, and that's just a bit low, on the low side. I would probably try not to play it if I can help it. In Dimir, you should have better blue alternatives for card draw and card advantage, like the Unstable Experiment. In terms of uncommons, the best uncommon is Vexed Bots, 62.3. That's the 2 mana 1/1 with flying, and whenever a villain you control enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on this ability at least once a turn. The solid thing that grows with the game is flying, so avoids most of the death touchy things, and can grow to quite large sizes. I mean, I've seen the ones from my opponent getting to a 6/6, after which I bounced it. But that's another story. But sometimes it won't be bounced, and it can be very, very quickly a large threat that the opponent has to deal with. Hidden Gem I selected, Serena Bargain Spinner, 3 and an Azorius hybrid for a 3/2 that has flying on your turn. And when it enters, you search your library for an aura or an equipment card and reveal it and put it in your hand. Win rate of 59.6, but a very small sample size makes me think that people play it only when they have one of the good auras. And one of those would be the 5 mana that gives +2/+2 and 2 robots, maybe with something like the aura that turns opponent creature into 1/1 wall as an alternative way of finding a card with Serena. So I don't think that it will be good in Hidden Mundanity. Thank you very much. I don't think it will be good in any Dimir deck, but if you have an aura or 2, card looks like a solid addition to any of your decks. And the trap I selected, Scorvus Ames, Crime Lord, 4 mana for a 3/3 Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, target creature you control connives. 55% win rate, not awful, but it's not something that you should be prioritizing, and it's an uncommon, so maybe some people pick it super quick. And yeah, Scorvus, not impressive at least. And maybe Scorvus feels Golgari as NLI 10 rights. And Tsirina also gets equipments, by the way, as like 36-0 writes in the chat. One particular equipment maybe that would fit with it in Dimir deck specifically is the Mayhem one, the one that you can cast for 2 mana from your graveyard, and it auto-equips and gives something flying and haste. You have so many discard outlets that you will be able to pull it off. Azorius. Would you believe it that Spectacular Tactics is the top Azorius common? I would. 60.3, which is a solid number for a common, especially in the like 3rd best deck of the 5-deck format. Hidden Gem I selected is Phantasmal Vision. 1 and a blue for a 1/3. Flying Vigilance whenever this creature attacks, mill a card. And I put it as a hidden gem because this doesn't scream Azorius. This screams Dimir. It's a villain. It mills, yada yada, whatever. But somehow it has also 59.4 win rate in Azorius. I think that's because 1/3 Vigilance is such a great body to modify. You turn it into a 2/4 Vigilant Flyer. You chip opponent for damage, and you have a blocker that will stop them from attacking a lot of the time. And if they attack into it, you almost can guarantee that they have some sort of a trick. So solid card with solid win rate. And the trap I selected, Hidden Mundanity. 2 mana for an aura, enchant creature, it becomes a 1/1 wall, basically. Citizen loses all the abilities. 54.1, not a great number. There's always a problem with cards like that. Like leaving that body on the board, even if they lose all the abilities, even if they can't attack, even if they can't really tap, it still leaves something. And there are a couple of nasty ways of getting rid of auras and getting the creature back. Top uncommon for Azorius, Argir, Tidal Spinner, 60.7% win rate, which is not far from Spectacular Tactics, by the way. Just think about it. But yeah, I think that this points to this kind of tempo-y, cheap creatures plus counters and bounce and whatever deck possibly existing. Hidden Gem I selected. Gororel scores to spiders. 2 mana, 2/1. When it deals damage to a spider, you destroy that creature. And then, if it is in your graveyard, you can pay 6 mana and exile it to create 2 tapped 1/1 colorless robot artifact creature tokens with flying. It has 58% win rate, which is super solid. I mean, that's comparable to best commons. I think that the ability to, apply some pressure early, block a big spider, maybe late, and then turn it into 2/1/1s for extortionate amount of mana, but who cares at that stage of the game? That's a pretty solid package that it has to offer. Trap I selected is Outsmart the Amateur. 3 blue for an instant, and you choose either drawing 3 cards or countering target spells and drawing a card. Again, 55% win rate in hand is not atrocious for this deck, but I think it's just a bit too expensive for what the Azorius deck is trying to do. Having said that, I trophied with a copy of it and 4 copies of the 3 mana counter spell in my deck today, but that was maybe not the most representative build of Azorius deck, because I was sort of like straddling the line between is white-blue open, is blue-black open, and I ended up at neither, so I had like a part of the package for Dimir and part of the package for Azorius, and I had to creatively weld this ugly-looking dissonance between being Azorius and being Dimir, and somehow it worked, but maybe there was plenty of luck involved in that as well. Best common in Gruul at 59%, Leyline Weaver. 1 and a Gruul hybrid for a 2/2 reach, taps to add red or green, and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, you untap it. It's a super annoying but super good creature. Annoying because I play decks that have pigeons and then maybe 2/2 flyers of some sorts, and Leyland Weavers just makes it super annoying to attack into it. And it ramps out big chonkers, something that my weenie decks also don't deal particularly well with because I never see Spectacular Tactics. But this is an outlying common in this color pair. The rest of them have much lower win rate. And you can see just how much lower when the Hidden Gem I selected, the Knife Trick, only has 54.8. And I selected it because 54.8 was a solid win rate for this color pair. And also because Knife Trick is technically a Rakdos card, so maybe people think like, what is it even doing in Gruul decks? But allegedly it can work in there to some extent. And to some extent because Gruul just generally doesn't work that well, so that's the problem it has. But maybe you have a couple of Red Mayhem cards, and Knife Trick is a solid way of triggering that mayhem. Trap I selected, Lurking Lizards, 1 and a green for a 1/3 trample. When you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, you can put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I did play quite a lot of it, actually, but 51%. I mean, maybe that's why I was winning slightly more than I thought I would be with Gruul, because I was putting the Lurking Lizards in on the board. It's also like awkward on the mana curve, because in a perfect world, when you play Gruul, you want to go Leyline Weaver into a 4-drop. And then when you do it, when do you cast Lurking Lizards? If you cast it on turn 3, you wasted 2 mana, basically, because you got 4 mana if you played the Leyline Weaver on turn 3. If you play it on turn 2, then you don't have a Weaver on turn 2. And that also means that you can play the 4-drops only on turn 4 rather than on turn 3. So there's like this awkward tension, and because of that, it's just not Sahagin, even though it tries to pretend it's a Sahagin, but it's just not. Then in terms of the best uncommon, terrific team up, same one as in the Selesnya decks, 59.3, so 5 percentage points lower win rate in Gruul than it had in Selesnya, but we have to keep in mind that Gruul generally has a 5 percentage point lower win rate than Selesnya. So cards are probably equally powerful for their deck. It's just that their deck are not equally powerful. Gem I selected is Lavaborn Goblins, 56.7. And that maybe has something to do with the knife trick. There might be just a sort of mayhem package into those green-red decks. Again, nothing to write home about with 56.7% win rate, but that's probably like third, fourth best uncommon in Gruul in terms of performance. And the trap I selected is twofold, and that's both signpost uncommons. Dreadfang, loathed by fans, and Shekau, Predation Shadow. Both of them have a win rate of around 54%, which is super low, and means that both of them are sort of MS. They're like creatures that cannot trigger web slinging. They're big dumb things that don't do much on the enter the battlefield. Now Shekau at least hopefully might draw you a card, but it does cost 7 mana to cast, so it's a bit complicated. Now keep in mind that 54% win rate for Dreadfang and Shekau is still above the 53.4 Gruul's generic win rate, but you would expect slightly more from signpost and commons. So underperformance definitely. And we have the last one, Rakdos. Best common at a stupendous 55.9% win rate. Now look at same card in the mirror, 60.8. Boom, 55.9. Not even 56. Still, the card is good. Hidden Gem I selected, and if the best common was 55.9, don't expect magnificent numbers. Hidden Gem I selected with 54% is Mob Lookout. That's the 1 and Dimir hybrid. Human rogue villain. It's an 0/3, and when it enters, target creature you control connives. And yeah, I think that it's pretty solid late in the game. Sort of like enters, loots, you block something, you gain a bit of life through that. But nothing to write home with the 54% win rate. The trap I selected is Wardens of Silver Web Summit. 3 mana for a 2/3 with reach. When it becomes tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So basically, ramages on attack. Unless you find a different way of tapping it, which there are some. But 49.7% means I'm not going to probably lose my sleep trying to figure out how this works. And the uncommons, best uncommon in Rakdos is Lavaborn Goblins, 59.3. This is like literally the only reason to be in Rakdos, the Lavaborn Goblins. If you have multiples of that, maybe you can build a deck. Otherwise, I would hard avoid it. Hidden Gem I selected, in fairness, very few decks played it. But when they played it, 56% is good. It's better than any common in Rakdos in terms of win rate. So maybe there's something on building red heavier Rakdos decks, maybe with some chunky creatures to ramp 3-drop into 5-drop kind of situation. 56.2 for the Infairness. That's the one, by the way, 3 mana, 0/0. When it enters, you search your library for a basic mountain, also known as Patrick Sullivan, and then you put it into the battlefield tapped, and then it gets +1/+1 for each mountain you control, and then when it leaves the battlefield, you must sacrifice a land. Now, a land, not a mountain, so it can be actually used. I drew 1 mountain, 3 forests. I cast Infairness, bring the second mountain, and then it dies. I sacrifice one of the forests, so now I have double red, double green, and I fixed my mana a bit through the play of Infairness. But in the perfect world, you would prefer to play a deck that has 12 upwards or 11 upwards of mountains in order for it to be eligible. Trap I selected, Nil, Vessel of Valgavoth. 3 mana for a 2/2. When it enters, return target villain card from your graveyard to your hand. So Gravedigger, basically. And villain spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. It's a very annoying card. but I think it's strictly a Dimir card, and in Rakdos is just slightly out of place. As I would like to stress that Nils is a trap in Rakdos. It's very good in Dimir, actually. But it has poor numbers in Rakdos decks. And that's it. That's it. We got there. We got through all 5 of the archetypes. And yeah, I am knackered. So I'm going to try to cook something next week, going a bit deeper. And maybe I will do an episode on reading signals and draft navigation in Pick to Draft, because I think that even if people are not super interested, in through the Omenpaths, I think maybe it's interesting to explore a bit. What does it mean to pick to draft? How often do people pivot, and what are the results of it? How do I read the signals in such a weird format? Because there are fewer agents sending signals, so the signals could be technically stronger. But until then, I'll just see you next week.